I don't quite know tonight, friends, where we go. The energy's there. But it hasn't found a focus. Don't look worried. It's of no consequence. The important thing is the energy is there. That is the important thing. If life is static and there is no thing, nothing, in terms of development, in terms of movement, in terms of changing life patterns, then certainly evolution is absent. If there is energy, there is the possibility then of awakening, of creativity, of interaction. Inevitably, all that will involve striving. It will involve, obviously, the conflict of interests. Active in all this will be what we call the anti-factor. The anti-factor, which will happen, which does happen, which is certainly active in human experience.
Sorry, what factor?
The anti-factor. We may attribute the anti-factor to evil spirits, or to the stars, or to karma, or to some capricious hierarchy of gods who play with humanity. Or to each other. If we don't like what the other bloke's doing, or if we feel disconcerted by what the other bloke has done, that is the anti-factor. Because I've got to be right, therefore he's got to be wrong. All of this, of course, is a very big theme and a very big subject. What is it that concerns us? Inevitably, we have to home in on what appears to be relevant. And what is surely relevant is not working through abstractions, evaluating life, society, the universe, according to some research or other that has been rationalized, conclusions drawn from it. really matters. We come back, of course, to what is a human being. What are the potentialities of a human being? And we've just gone through a list of obvious contradictions in human experience. In all of this, of course, it's relevant to ask, what is yoga? What is the role of yoga? What can yoga do for humanity? That question must begin with, what can yoga do for the individual? Then perhaps we may have a further perspective. What is the relationship between the individual and the whole, and the rest of mankind, and the earth, and the solar system, and the universe? We are inseparable from the totality. The totality is in us, just as we are of the totality. One of the most interesting things in human research at the end of this century is surely the remarkable discovery that is among a number that bear out the affirmations of the ancient rishis of India. And we have to ask, how did they know these things? By what means did they arrive at that state of knowledge? Seemingly, they arrived at their insight not by a philosophic process, not the ancient rishis. Because what they saw and what they announced as what they saw was before philosophy was invented. Arguably, the ancient Hindus may be said to be the inventors of philosophy. In various standard texts published over many generations, you had many titles. Certainly, pre the last war, history of philosophy, history of art, history of music. These titles, published in the West, Britain, America, and so on, Europe, are seemingly unaware of the cultural grandeur of the world of the ancient East. Philosophy began with the Greeks. Mathematics began with the Greeks, it seems. And that was not so very long ago, mere 2,600 or so years ago. Nothing. The approach now is a bit more eclectic, a bit wider. And it has become perceived that wonderful as was the cultural glory of Greece, that it owed much in inspiration and information to ancient Egypt, to Iran, and linked with Iran, India, because the ancient Vedic culture predominated in northern India and Iran. But philosophy, what the Greeks developed marvelously as philosophy, did not have its origins in Greece, but ancient India was leading the world, or was leading civilization, much before the Greeks, in the rationalization of human thinking. But we are referring to something older than the 6 classical systems of Indian philosophy and their precursors, something much older, something more mysterious, and in that sense much more interesting. How did the ancient rishis know what they knew? They knew many things. We won't enumerate them now, or attempt to. But of the greatest significance was their insight concerning human consciousness and its potentiality. They did not see a human being as an animal. They did not see a human being as a creature with limitations in consciousness. They saw human beings as a field of energy which was capable of enlargement, capable of growth, capable of fulfillment, much beyond its existing condition. And all their teachings in the form of parables, in the form of poetry, in the form of affirmations, which are invocatory images, have, it would appear, the intention of impacting upon human understanding in order to invoke and enlarge and enhance consciousness. Now, modern physics has produced this fascinating evidence, which echoes the perceptions of the ancient seers, that the physical world is insubstantial. In the last analysis, it is waves of energy. Solid objects are waves of energy. Now, the modern physicist is committed to the view that there's no such thing in this area of physics as a wholly objective experiment. Because the consciousness of the experimenter is inseparable from the experiment itself. And the consciousness of the experimenter will affect the results of the experiment. That's a most extraordinary conclusion to reach in science. That objectivity is lost. But when we go as deeply as possible, as yet possible, into the structure of matter, the underlying energies of the universe, those energies and the way they act are inseparable from what is occurring in the mind of the seer. So that in the here and now, what is happening in our experience is inseparable from the way we are seeing it. Now, these scientists, we've met one or two of them, some very interesting people around. We've met one or two of them, and essentially they are decent human beings with professional integrity and dedication to the task in hand, the task of research, the compulsion they have to, as dispassionately as possible, uncover what is this mystery of the universe, in which now mind and matter are inseparable. Inseparable. But this was the teaching of the ancient rishis. Only they went deeper, further, and maintained that the substance of the universe, the fundamental substance of the universe, is indeed energy, is indeed power, is indeed force, but that force is held within the consciousness of a cosmic thinker. And all individual consciousnesses are inseparable from that cosmic consciousness, that cosmic thinker. Now, these decent chap scientists, like ourselves, can recognize that. And they're amazed by it. They're disconcerted by it. It's not the routes they wanted to follow or expected to have to follow. It's leading into confusion. It's destroying the dependable process of experimentation by which the scientist was able to predict, be dogmatic. This will happen because this is this and this is this. Now, if there is such a thing as a consciousness that is enlarged, enlightened, and these ancient seers talked about all that, What is an enlightened consciousness? I actually prefer the word illumined. Because, again, in the mind of the ancient rishis, knowledge is light, and light is knowledge. Ultimately, there's no such thing as evil. There is only lack of light. And that lack of light we can perceive in the relative state of things will precipitate malfunction. So, the healer, the helper, the guardian, the guide, must necessarily have a place when, in our disturbed human mass condition, there is malfunction. That is lack of light. Now, it all seems to be very simple, which doesn't mean to say it's easy. Simple doesn't necessarily mean the easy. But when it comes down to ourselves, everything in nature is present within ourselves, including the fact that we're much more water than we're anything else. Which is why some of us may be called Lulu. Now, we are then fully the essence of what we think is the problem. We are also the solution. We are the potentiality. And we are the means by which contradictions and therefore lack of understanding is resolved. And the essential thing is the knowing of light. Now, what is light? Light is obviously, in the first instance, a fuller, a deeper, a richer awareness than we now possess. The more we are in a sleep state, the more we are in a conditioned psychological state of perpetual reverberation, cause and effect, which has no end. As long as that is the reality that we insist on clinging to, then we are extremely limited, lacking in perception, lacking in everything, because we're lacking in light. The impact of experience, if it's meaningful, is that which produces change. Meaningful change comes always from shock. That which provokes us. And shock need not necessarily be painful. It can be quite the opposite. It can be ecstatic. But we're hit by the impact of something very powerful, very potent. It comes to us as a shock. It is a shock. When that happens, our conscious mind might experience confusion because it is having to accommodate the insistence of a deeper level of ourselves, that we shall enlarge, we shall become more, and we will only know more when we become more. Now, when the scientist becomes more, and he looks at matter with a consciousness that is light, what will happen to matter then? What will happen to life then? What will happen to the world and society then, when light is born into the human psyche? We are already light. Relative to the chimpanzee, we are in a state of light. Relative to a rishi, we're more like Caliban groping in the cave. But the fact is, we have this prodigious potentiality not to become something different, but only to become what we really and truly are. To awaken from a nightmare of non-reality. If and when we receive the shocks that do awaken us, we may well feel startled, surprised. How daft could I be that I looked at it that way? Ridiculous. I'm not like that at all. This is the point. I am not like what I think I am. Within each of us, through the impact of experience, which an ultimately benign nature will bring to us, through the impact of experience, some of it will, as it were, filter through as an offering to the level of light. And that experience transmuted, offered at the altar where the living flame is within. The old sense, the old sensibility will be immolated in that fire. Will be transfigured, will arise as a smoke offering, as it were, and be absorbed into the level of light, the Buddhic level. This is indeed a tricky time for the human race. My goodness me. If only because there have never been so many of us. 8 million souls in London alone, or more. There might be more than what the census figures show. Tucked away all over the place. This prodigious concentration of human psychological energy, which is the causal thing, means that that unity of which we are part is awash with tremendously destructive forces. No man is an island. We are part of the whole, and we are affected, we are influenced. Partly why we feel a lot better if we go to somewhere remote. And that pressure is not there in the same degree. Nothing like the same degree. What is a healing experience? What is a healing place? We know what's not a healing place, don't we? If you've ever been inside an old prison, I remember Monty Barnes telling me about the prisons he visited. I thought maybe he was being a little eccentric at first. He said, when you go in there, he said, you come out, you feel it clinging to you. You feel you need a bath. It makes you shudder. What's he talking about? Now, old Monty, especially when I knew him at that time, I think we even changed him a little bit, in a funny way. But at that time, he was a very rational chap. He'd been a Marxist, and, level-headed sort of chap. But he'd been interpreting the phenomena of society. In a semi-scientific way. But anyway, when I went into a prison, I had just that same experience. What is clinging to you? What is it? It impinges. Now, the place not to go, if you need regeneration and healing, restoration, inspiration, is into such a place as a prison. If you want to reform someone, the last place you should put them in is prison. That's just another of the madnesses that we're prone to. What is a healing place? One healing place, for example, is when the climate is benign, when nature itself is clearly revealing the harmony of the elements. And you lie on the pebbles near the ocean, and the sea is coming and going. There is the sun, the light, there is the air. There's the vibrant earth that you're touching. There's the motion of the waters and the voice of it and the power it generates. All life comes from the waters. All the great figures are said to be born of the waters. That's what Moses means, born of the waters. Zoroaster was born of the waters. Many are.
What does that mean? What does that mean?
Yes, what does it mean? Think about it. We'll discuss it tomorrow night, maybe. But what I'm trying to point out now is that there is a time, there is a way in which we are at our simplest. We are allowing nature to do in its wisdom what it will with this organism. If we're on the edge of the waters, there is the power of the light, there's the force of the waters, there's the vibration of the earth. There's all the subtle, pulsing power in the air. In a way, the most meaningful is the revealed sound of the sea, the rumble and the hiss, and the inflections as it ebbs and flows. If we can let ourselves empty out, and because nature abhors a vacuum, allow the fundamental subtle forces in nature to take possession of our being, we will be restored. Now, there are paradoxes and contradictions. One of the contradictions is this. Given an extreme pressure of deprivation and depravity, the need of the psyche can itself invoke a saving response from the power that is beyond the mind. Many instances in human history where those imprisoned, those in dungeons, those in the pit become illumined. That's another story. That's another side to it. It's not so simple as to say, give us the most favourable conditions and circumstances and proximities, and we will then be healthier, happier, and more fulfilled. Not so. The opposite can happen. There's an ancient parable, Hindu parable, Atri in the pit, that we won't go into tonight. What's he doing down the pit, of all people? This is the fact. If we ourselves can open the instruments of our perception to the healing force, to the enlightening power that is nature, that is our guardian, that is our destiny, then we will change. What did Blake say? When the doors of perception are cleansed, then will man see everything as it truly is, infinite. Now, it's not just the scientist who is equipped to perceive that the action of consciousness will fundamentally affect the state of matter and therefore the circumstances of our experience. Life will change, can change, is changing according to what is happening in our consciousness. What we have to beware of is this. Insanity is a fact, all too obvious a fact, and that collectively humanity can be insane just as it can be insane individually. We've only to pick up the newspaper, we've only to switch on the radio, and you can only be aghast but we have to ask, what possesses human consciousness for these things to happen? What does possess human consciousness? And yet ultimately there is no evil. There is only lack of light, avidya. Vidya is knowledge, but vid means light. Avidya is no light. The light is already within us. Some of our experience has become refined into a consecrated offering. And in that consecrated offering, our true state, our true nature, gains in density. And as it gains in density, it will gradually, spontaneously, seek to descend onto the altar where heaven and earth do meet. The altar, the place of consecration, which is there within the human structure. It's the old meaning that you'll find in the Rig Veda of humanity offering up the oblation from the earth, the purified gifts of the earth, the fruits of the earth, that the divine may descend and join with humanity in a unity of the senses in which spirit and substance become one. And in that, the entity changes, life changes, the earth changes. What's important is not what the sociologists have to say. I do wish it were as simple as that. I do wish all we had to do would be to go to school, take the right courses, acquire the right diplomas, and then all would come right. Like clergymen who go to college and they take a degree in divinity. Do they emerge divine? They don't even believe in the divine. Most peculiar. The fact is, there is this gradually densifying being, taking a unique form, which is truly uniquely ourselves. It does not recognize the limitations of our petty surface self. It does not recognize the absurdities that we are, along with the rest of humanity. We're just as daft as the rest of them. And it's daft everywhere. What is taking place on the level that is so-called unconscious is far more important than what we can observe and measure with our external senses plus instruments. What is taking place in the unconscious. All life is energy, consciousness is energy, creativity and manifestation are energy, and we are energy. And our little surface mind is aware of only a little of that. What happens in the interaction between the individual and the collective, the mass, depends on what that individual is. If a rishi walks through our streets, everything reverberates. For good or ill. It's a dualistic reaction. But there is a level of us which knows what is to be known, which is what is to be known. That level of us, our potential, is active and vital and vibrant and ever seeking to penetrate down into the instinctual level which dominates and earth binds our surface self. that potential within has no limits other than what we impose upon it. But it will not indefinitely tolerate those limits. Its pressures, its powers will blow us apart. And then may come a time when we think we're in trouble. But in fact, our aches and pains, as Khalil Gibran put it, are but the breaking of the shell that encloses our understanding. Our true being is a dancing angel. When a rishi passes by, he knows that being of light. And that being of light knows him or her. So, as Vasishtha said, when I pass by, all my children know me. More than time for tea.